Hello everyone and welcome to SIGGRAPH Day 2 2024 here at the Maxon booth. Hello Internet, I'm back again, Matthias aka Major VFX on all the socials, and today we are doing the same as we always do at these amazing shows, and that is showcasing how artists create some of the best visuals you'll see on any screen anywhere using Maxon software. So to my left, longtime friend, we have him in person this time. We've had him virtually at some of our other presentations, but get ready for some spooky, amazing scenes with Luis Miranda. Big round of applause.
Hello. All right. Can everybody hear me? Yeah. Okay. Awesome. So my name is Luis Miranda, as Matthias said. My kind of specialty tends to be more in the horror realm, and so I kind of wanted to collect all of the weird tips and tricks that I have learned from making a lot of these spooky animations. And so yeah, that's why it's called Weird Things I've Learned Making Spooky Stuff. So here's a little bit of a background on me. I'm a 3D artist here in Denver, Colorado. Since I grew up in Denver, I had the privilege of getting to work for the Denver Broncos back when, they were good. Back when that was kind of actually one of my earlier jobs. I got to go to the Super Bowl with them because, they had Peyton Manning. Got to attend the game. I also even had my stuff shown at the game. And because I was an employee, I ended up getting a Super Bowl ring out of it. So I thought that was pretty cool. But then after that, I ended up going freelance. And after that, it's been a lot of interesting clients, such as The Mill, the Famous Group, and also locally here with Spilt. I've even gotten to work with Beeple, which I thought was pretty cool. So something about the Famous Group is they still do a lot of sports stuff. And I actually got to do the open titles, just like the open video for the Baltimore Ravens. And that actually recently got an Emmy for Best Open. So I thought that was pretty neat. So I'm going to show you guys my reel so you guys can see the type of work I do. And then we can go into these project files and break them down. All right. Oop. Wrong one. All right. Let's go ahead and pause that. All right. So ultimately, what I want to do is make my way to this project file, which is inside of Unreal. And so this is a animation that I made inside of Cinema, but am using Unreal to render it. But this is kind of like the accumulation of all of the weird tips and things that I've learned along the way. So in order to use Unreal, you need to know how to use your UVs. You also need to know your rigging. And also you need to know how to communicate between software, from Cinema 4D over to Unreal. And so this guy, I would consider to be the accumulation of all those tips. So you can kind of see how it's running. It's actually running in real time. There's no playback of any video. But before we get to all that, I want to show kind of where this sort of trajectory into horror started. So the first video I got is on, it's this one about, I'm going to preface it before I press play on it. It is a modern retelling of the Book of Revelation using artificial intelligence and robots in place of characters that are in the Bible. And so this is definitely kind of taking the idea that AI is not a net positive for humanity and actually could potentially be a much worse thing than just it taking your job, So I'm going to go ahead and hit play on this, and then I'll break down one of the scenes. So the scene that I want to focus on is on this guy right here. So I kind of feel like all the other scenes are pretty typical. Let me actually mute that guy real quick. They're pretty typical. They seem, realistic. Like, obviously there's some weird stuff like their eyes glowing and whatnot. But at the end of the day, this guy looks a little bit more fantastical. And that's because I based this on old, like Renaissance type paintings that were commissioned by the church, where they would try to pack as much information into a single painting. And they were always very vertical, very dense. And so I try to do that within the limitations of a CinemaScope frame. So instead of having a very vertical thing, I try to have something that is more like utilizing Z depth. And so you can kind of see how there's like the soldiers in the front, you got this big tank in the middle, and then you got these giant the robots in the back, which all represent different 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. And so let's go ahead and hop into the project file. And so here it looks there's a lot going on, but if you hop out of the camera, you can see that that the characters are actually in the scene. They're not like composited, which normally I would do something like that, where I would have a bunch of different layers and then just add these guys instead of like After Effects or something like that. But I kind of wanted to see if I can pull it off within the render rather than try to cheat it in After Effects. And so, yeah, really just playing around with the scale and also the perspective really helps hide the fact that, some of these guys are just like really big compared to these smaller characters here. Yeah, so like this tank in particular, I was really happy about, because I bought this Kit Bash 3D like tank set, and so you can see that there's all of these like things. They even have some of these like pre-built like tanks for you, but I thought the idea of a spider tank would fit this really strange aesthetic of robots taking over the world, and the idea of like spiders is kind of just like unnerving for people. And so just making it into a big war machine. Oops, sorry. I also feel like it was important to not use any specific type of tank that is realistic or exists in real life. So like if I use like an American tank or a Russian tank, it would be very political, and that's like not really what I was trying to do. I was just trying to like do more of a commentary on like technology and like the dangers of it and whatnot. But the thing that I really like took from this guy is that a lot of these shots are pretty much just tableaus. Like they're just frozen with a camera running through it. And even though I was using Octane, it took about 18 hours or something to render those 40 seconds. And I was like, there has to be a faster way of doing this, especially for something that doesn't require that much. There's not much going on. So it's like you can recreate this in Unreal. So it's like, how do we get started in that process? Cool. All right, so I'm going to move on to the next video, which ended up kind of opening my eyes to UVs. So this guy, let me turn up the volume a little bit. I'll talk over it. But this guy, he's just a creepy little eyeball doing weird stuff to this house. But the thing that I really enjoy about this is how the UVs work on the moon itself. So if you notice, it has one side's the moon and one side is the eye. So if I go over to Substance Painter, we can see that we have the moon on the back and this creepy eye in the front. But if we look at our 2D view, we can see that there's 2 tiles. And that's because these things are called UDIMs. And it turns out that Cinema 4D does actually support UDIMs, but it's not like the most obvious thing. So I'm going to open up a new project file, and I'm just going to bring in a sphere. I'm going to set this guy to hexahedron, and I'm going to switch over to my UV edit tool. So when I switch this guy over to polygons, I can switch over to this guy. And if I double click, it'll create like a little seam. And then if I switch over to UF, I can select 1/2 of it. And if I go over here to my automatic UVs, I can hit apply, and it'll pack it inside of that 1x1 square. And then if I do it to the other side, I can do the same. And so if I wanted to, pack these guys together, I could go here into my UV packing and then hit apply. But if you notice, it puts them all on one side, and there's like this entire half over here completely unused. And so it's not really it's not very optimal for that. However, if I were to just grab one side and then go over here to my transform, and here on X, I just put 1 and then move it over to the side. Oh, uh-oh. I don't know where that went, but let's see. Oh, there it is. Okay. Sorry, the Wacom tablet just, well, okay. Okay. So if I move it over to one side, you can see that there's one UV island here and another one on the side. And what's important about that is that Substance Painter automatically recognizes that as UDIMs. And even though there isn't really a thing telling you that you can create UDIMs, just simply adding a 1 on the X will move it exactly one tile over. And so the main thing that like Substance does not like is when some of these when these UV islands go from one to the next and they're sharing a border. And so using the transform will make sure that it goes exactly one tile over, and you don't have to worry about that overlap. And so if I were to export this sphere, let's do an OBJ. I'm going to go drop it in here. UDIM. And then if I go over here to my guy, I'm going to close this guy down real quick. Discard. And I grab this guy. There's like this option here that says enable UDIM workflow. And if I hit OK, you'll see that there's now 2 tiles that I can paint between. And what's really great about this is that if you drop in a material onto it, even though they're not like perfectly aligned, this thing is running at 1K resolution, but because originally it was only going to take up half the tile, you technically now have like about 4K amount of resolution, even though it's a 1K resolution document. So if you were to crank it up to 4K, you would be technically working on something like 8K, which is really nice for being able to do like close-ups on your models. But if you already use Substance, you probably already know that you can pack it using UDIMs within it. But the one issue is that it doesn't give you the option to like customize it where you want it. So that's where I would say that Cinema 4D gives you that option that you normally wouldn't have, because you would have to just keep running the algorithm to pack it. So I'm going to grab a different character and show you guys how the how the packing works on this guy. So if I were to grab this guy and drop it in, oops, sorry, I'm going to actually close it. All right. So if I import this guy without any sort of like doing anything to it, it's going to look really weird. There's going to be all the materials are just like packed on top of each other, and we don't want that. This is considered to be like really bad. So what you can actually do, so if we go back, close this guy down, and import it one more time, and we go over here to our auto unwrap options, it gives you the option to do seams, UV islands, and packing. So since we already have the UV islands, and we just need them to be packed, we can just set this to over here to recompute on the islands, and then it'll also pack it for us. And here you have the option to do UV tiles. So right now I have it set to 4, and so I'll just keep it there, and I'll just hit OK. And then it'll do its thing for a little bit. But once it's done, you'll see that it has created all these different UDIMs. And so everything is now packed over 4 UDIMs, or sorry, over 4 tiles. And yeah, you can basically paint across this entire thing, but it also allows you to work with a single material. And so in order to be able to access like all these UDIMs inside of Cinema 4D, what you want to do is use a redshift. So inside of redshift, if I switch back over here, and on the iMoon itself, let me find this guy. Is it this one? No. Sorry. Let's make sure that guy is selected, and here we go. Okay, so inside the material. Okay, so inside the material, what you want to do, god dang it, you want to go over here, and inside of your, where it says base color, your materials will have a 1001 or 1002 option, and all you have to do is replace that with this text right here that says it's the open bracket, UDIM, and then close bracket, and it'll basically go through and find all of the tiles, and then it'll assign it correctly. The only issue is that inside of the viewport, it looks like two eyeballs, but like when we view it inside of Redshift, it'll show it correctly. I don't necessarily want to open it right now, but yeah, like just that one little piece of code really helps out. All right, cool. Let's see. Let's go over to my animations and okay. All right, so I'm gonna switch over to ZBrush. Inside of ZBrush, there's a couple of cool little things that you can do for like horror type stuff. So let's say you want to do like damage or like cuts or something like that. You could use like the DEM standard, something like that. Oop. Okay, so if I do BDS, and so like this guy's fine. It just doesn't really have like, it just looks a little too clean. But if you want to do something that's a little bit more like creepy looking, you can use the blob tool, which is BBL. And so this one kind of has like that weird blobbiness to it. However, because there's all these weird, like there's not enough resolution for this guy, so it just ends up making these weird like squares. So if you activate your Sculptress, this one will start adding resolution wherever you do things. So like you see it like starts tessellating it. But also at the same time, it's just like it's a circular blob, and that's just whatever. But if you go over here to your alpha, and if you were to select like this alpha 60, which already comes with the software, and you like run it across, you can see that it starts to create something a little bit more interesting looking. And if I hold down Alt, you can see that it starts cutting in, and it starts looking a little bit more like, you know, like a cut or damage. And so let me erase that. And so if I were to like rotate and just kind of like give her like a Glasgow smile, kind of like Joker, like it just naturally starts like appearing, and like I can adjust the size of it. Let's see, by pressing this guy. Yeah, and so the smaller I make it, the more resolution it gives you. And so you know, it can get a little crazy, but here's like something that I've done. Like I don't know if you guys watch YouTube at all. I mean, I'm sure you guys do, but there's a channel called Dead Meat. It's one of my favorite channels, and they have this logo that's just like a piece of meat that like is bloody, whatever. And so I wanted to try to turn it into a 3D object. And so when I first started like detailing it, I was using the clay tool. So I use just this clay buildup. And what I would try to do is like either like try to cut into it, which it kind of does it, but it's like, again, it's not very organic looking. It just looks like a flat thing that's being scooped out. But if I use the BBL and go over here and select something like, let's say, which alpha, this alpha 25, and I start using it, you can see that it starts creating a little bit more organic shapes in there, instead of it just being a regular like blob or whatever. And so I feel like that's a much nicer way of approaching detailing, especially for horror and gore and whatnot. I also made this Jason mask, which also utilizes that a lot for all the damage here and like all the scratches and whatnot. And a lot of this stuff was I figured out when making characters for this company called, what are they called again? Crypt TV. They asked me to take their characters that they have for their videos and then turning them into 3D models. So you can see their famous character, the Looksee, and this one was made in a similar fashion. This was definitely one of my earlier attempts, as you can tell by like how smooth some of this stuff is. And so you also have like characters like this guy, which they're I definitely feel like this Jason mask was pretty much like the culmination of a lot of that stuff and getting all these weird details. Eventually what I did was I UV unwrapped it, made a low poly version, sent it to Unreal, and just did a real-time render with it. And so and the other benefit of that is that you can send it over to Substance for texturing, and the materials that you make inside of Substance work natively and like perfectly inside of Unreal. Cool. All right, so yeah, here's the final product for that guy. Yeah, and all of that was done in real time. So like, yeah, all of this stuff was just basically driven by textures. Even though I did make it in ZBrush, I mostly just used it to drive the normal maps inside of the software. And so once it was all completed and textured, all I had to do was bring in the camera from Cinema and put this guy in the middle, and basically everything orbited around it. It was pretty nice and convenient workflow. Okay, so I'm going to show you this one, mostly because like just the way the eyes work on this guy, it uses the the aim constraint. And so if you're into character animation, it's pretty simple. All you have to do is just like set that up, and you can have these controllers for your eyeballs. And so something that like really stuck out to me about this thing is that like the way the eyes are just staring at you become a little unnerving. And a lot of the animations that I make tend to be in the first person. So when you have this guy just kind of like staring over here before it goes blurred, like it's unnerving just to like have eyeballs staring back at you. And I ended up using that for a lot of different animations. So if we go over here to this guy, which is probably one of my more popular animations, the eyes are just like 100% locked into the camera, just staring at you the entire time. And I think, I honestly don't know like what is like so effective about this animation, but like I feel like it has something to do with the eyes just like staring at you. And it's a very simple thing to like just set up in all your animations. But the one thing that is a little weird about it is that when you try to bake it out for Unreal, the eyes don't typically bake out with keyframes. You have to like bake them out separately. Otherwise, they'll just be staring into the back of their head, and that by itself is kind of weird. Cool. So working back to the scary Unreal animation, this is the source file that I used, and so you can see that it's all in the POV of the of this person on the bed, and you can see this monster come up, and this is all Five Nights at Freddy's stuff. So I don't know if you guys are familiar with that. It's made a few of those things, and yeah, it's been a very nice subject matter to use to learn new techniques, such as this one. This is the first time I've ever rigged a character and actually done character animation with. So if I hop out of the camera, all right. You can see once I turn off geometry only, you can see that there's this entire rig over here, and like how the hands are sort of just like I have to make it work however I want. Otherwise, if I like kept it realistic, you would still see parts of his head and whatnot. And so I thought it would be really nice to have the hands come up by themselves. And so yeah, so the character itself is already rigged inside because it's taken from the video game Five Nights at Freddy's, but it doesn't come with any of the controllers. So that was something that I had to make on my own, and just using the base tools that are built in. and after that I was able to just recreate it. But I think the thing that's pretty fun about this guy is how I set up the camera system. So I have basically just like 3 cameras. So I have this guy that basically doesn't do anything, it's just stuck there. Then I have a second camera, which is actually attached to the hand of the monster. And then I have a second one that takes both of them. And what it does is that when it comes over here, it transitions from one camera to the next. And that's what gives the illusion of it being picked up. I didn't want to like mess around with keyframes and like try to make it follow the position when I can just like stick something onto the hand. And then once I take that project, once I take that like morph, I feed it into the motion camera. And on the motion camera, you can add all of the shake, and you can also mess around with targets. So you can see like there's that yellow thing just dashing around. And what that does is just like it allows you to add additional motion on top of those base cameras. And it's also very procedural. So like if you were to adjust one of those other cameras, it would automatically update down the line and it'll just keep updating. And so you don't have to be locked in until you want to be. And once you're done with that, all you have to do is bake it out into keyframes. And so you can see this entire thing being driven by keyframes. And once that's all done, you can basically export this project file along with the animation of the character, as well as the animation of the camera, and also all the geometry. And so when you export that out as an FBX, you can then import that inside of Unreal. And so if I were to click on any of these things inside the scene, you can see that the location is set to 000. And that's because the entire scene gets sent over as one thing, but it's still individual parts. But if you grab everything and dump it into a single level and set it to 000, it all goes to where it was inside the project file. And then with the camera itself, all you have to do is import the FBX and say take camera animation from FBX, and then suddenly you have the motion camera from Cinema 4D inside of Unreal. And I don't know if you guys have done any animation inside of Unreal. It's not the best right now for animation, and I do feel that the motion camera is probably one of the best tools for camera animations. And so when you kind of combine the power of like the real-time rendering along with the motion camera, I think you can like achieve some pretty cool stuff. Obviously it does require you to understand like how to transfer one thing to the other. But once you kind of have that workflow down, you can more or less create anything that's any size that you want. Like you don't have to worry about like how long is this going to take me to render. Like if it's running in real time, the thing that's really like holding you back is your own abilities, I guess, to make things look cool. And so yeah, and this software is free, so like why wouldn't you want to use it, especially if it can just like speed up your iteration process. Like if you look at the original animation, the teeth on this guy were a lot smoother. I didn't like that, so I just went into Substance and added like all this grime and stuff onto it, and then re-rendered it, and it was just like it took 30 seconds. And so I don't know, I just really like that particular workflow, and it kind of unshackles you from the constraints of your computer. All right. So speaking of Unreal, there's a couple of things that you can do inside of Unreal that you can't necessarily do inside of Cinema, which I hope they do bring in one day. But that's the ability to use your iPhone to control a character, their face. So this one's a little creepy, so...
What? No, I am a real person. Maybe we have a bad connection. I'm sorry about that.
Will you tell me you're not a robot? Just say I'm not a robot, please.
I am a real person.
All right. I'm going to play that one more time, just so you guys can hear the audio.
No, I am a real person. Maybe we have a bad connection. I'm sorry about that.
Will you tell me you're not a robot? Just say I'm not a robot, please.
I am a real person.
Yeah. So yeah, that's all being driven by an iPhone basically. And so I just have a character and I just have like the phone in front of my face, and then I just I'll take like a TikTok audio where it's like, you know, something weird, and then try to make an animation out of it. And so I just have it. I just try to lip syncing it as best as I can. This one's probably one of my more effective ones. But the thing that I really like is that it lets you do like eye tracking. So like the way that she kind of like looks away,
You're not a robot.
and
Just
then looks
say
back,
I'm not a.
like that was all just me, just like moving my face around, and it just, I don't know, it captured something that I don't think I would have been able to capture it had I just animated it with my own abilities. I do have another one that does something similar, which is not quite as weird. Where is it? Oh, here it is.
Don't you want to become a cult leader? Since the death of God, there's been a vacancy open. You could fill that void. Here's how.
So yeah, so I kind of feel like, even though it's very obvious that it's only their face and head that's moving and their body is like unnaturally stiff, it kind of gives the idea of like a doppelganger, or like that sort of uncanny valley look. And so like I think most people try to avoid that, but given the fact that it's supposed to be scary and supposed to be unnerving, I think it kind of worked in my favor in that particular case. But also I just didn't want to, I also didn't know how to do like the body stuff. So like you can see like the body is just completely frozen, but the head, you know, is doing all the expressing and whatnot. And yeah, this is all being run inside of Unreal, and the fact that you can just do that, I don't know, I just think is pretty magical. All right, cool. All right, does anybody have any questions so far about what I've shown? No? All right, cool. All right, let's see. Actually, you know what? Okay, so here's the project file that I did for the ball pit animation. And so it's pretty basic animation. Like you can see like how it just dropped in a bunch of balls. They're just sort of floating. And then you have the guy move. And it's like a pretty basic, you know, like it wasn't really anything special. There was maybe like a few hundred balls in there. And Cinema 4D is good enough to like run these simulations pretty easily. But when you look at like how it's set up, it's like really basic. So you have, you know, your cloner with all the things, but there's only 3 lights. And so 1, 2, 3, and that's literally it. And I don't know, it's just like the fact that 3 lights and a very simple simulation can achieve pretty cool results is pretty cool. And this guy also has the eyes locked onto it. You can't really see it here, but when you see it in the animation, it does. So if I were to move the camera around, it would just follow it. And that's like one of the cool things about the aim constraint. Okay, cool. Let's see. Honestly, I'm kind of like, I'm not really entirely sure what else to cover because I kind of powered through everything. So, oh yeah. Oh yeah, so there's a couple of different effects that I use. So inside of Unreal, you can actually do a VHS effect inside of the software, which is cool, but the only issue is that it doesn't really give you the ability to modify things underneath. So when you export it with that effect, that's pretty much all you're going to get. Whereas if I use the Red Giant like VHS filter, like I can kind of do things underneath it, adjust it, fix things, and then apply the VHS on top. And I think that's, I kind of found myself doing that process more. But I do think it's really cool that like you can do a VHS like just within the render. And I don't know, that's pretty cool, I think. Say what? Yeah. So like you can do it with and without it. So then combine them if you want. But basically everything that inside of Unreal, there's like a volume that you can use that you can apply post-processing to. And when you have the post-processing going, it'll render directly onto the video. And so, yeah, it's like pretty much a lot of games will have that, where if you walk in from one room to the next, one room can have a different set of post-processing effects, and then when you walk into the next one, you can have a completely different one, and you can change the mood between the two rooms like that. So, yeah, cool. Anybody else? Oh yeah. Oh yeah. So what I did was I basically just grabbed the frame, just like a frame from the animation, took it into Photoshop, and then I just drew on top of it. And then I just made a bunch of different Photoshop layers. And then inside of After Effects or like Premiere, I just had it play as a sequence and on top of it. And so if you, I can play it again so you can see, but like it's basically it repeats a little bit. So, yeah. So like, yeah, I just kind of grabbed like this frame right here, and then I just started drawing on top of it and doing a bunch of different individual animations. And this is like the first time I ever did like frame by frame. And so like the most like animation thing was that, like those little dots bouncing around. But everything else was basically just me tracing over the image and just trying to find fun things to do with it. I have a different animation that utilizes something similar. Let me see if I have it on here. No, I do not. But yeah, it utilizes that same idea where, like on the second one I decided to do, I actually grabbed the animation, did it an image sequence, and then I put it into, what is it, Procreate, and then I did the frame by frame animation on it, and just, yeah, basically worked the entire thing through, and it was pretty fun. So, yeah. Yeah. Anybody else? All right. Okay. Doesn't seem like, cool. Oh. All right, so honestly, I'm gonna go back to this guy real quick. So I'm gonna break on a different shot from this. So like this one honestly is probably one of my favorite shots from the animation. So this explosion in the background is really just a VDB that I threw in there, but it's actually a combination of multiple VDBs. I'm not like good enough at Houdini to make my own VDB, so I had to like combine a few together to recreate this. But this was actually inspired by a shot from this one game. I forget what it's called. But it's a very similar idea where there's like a big explosion in the background and the camera's moving back. But the way that they filmed it was they had a remote control camera that was just repeating the same motion over and over. And they had people on green screen like acting out the motions. And they were shooting it in slow motion. And so they were able to combine multiple shots, but since this is CG, I could just pretty much just keep populating it with stuff over time and recreate like that sort of effect. But yeah, this one was pretty fun. Just, I don't know, like, so like if we go through the video itself, like this guy right here is supposed to be the first horseman of the apocalypse. And if you are familiar with your Bible, the first one is the Antichrist. And the thing that separates this guy from the other ones is that he has a golden crown, and also there's like moon shape behind him. That's actually like a really big deal as well. And so as we work through the story, we have like people who are like the zealots, like the people who are like really big into worshiping these characters. You know, like what would happen if something like that were to happen? There's a good chance that a lot of like cults would be formed around it. And so these people would be like the first, you know, in line for that. And then as you move forward, you have like these people with the glowing eyes, and these are the people who become kind of like the indoctrinated. They're the ones that kind of become sort of like the cannon fodder for the people. And yeah, then and this character, he's considered war. So he's considered to be the second horseman to arrive. And so I wanted to represent him with red and, you know, weaponry. And then as you move forward, you got this guy, which is Pestilence. And he's the one that, like, you know, like just, I don't know, just general depth stuff. But here, you know, you can see that they're inside a laboratory. And the laboratory, you know, like this is, you know, during COVID when I made this. So, like, there was a lot of, you know, like disease stuff that was on my mind. And so, like, this would have been, like, kind of like, how did this thing escape? You know, this is, like, you know, an example of that. And so, you know, and like every character that is part of like that's like indoctrinated, I have them represented with these eyeballs that are glowing. And so whenever you see a character that their eyes are glowing, and it just means that they're working in cahoots with the robots. And then here, this guy represents famine, and so, you know, I wanted to show, you know, like him like withholding food from people, and so you kind of have like this cool simulation of rice on his hand, but it's all frozen since it's a tableau. And then finally, these are kind of like representations of chaos where they're kind of like performing sacrifices and whatnot, and just sort of like how it culminates into this final sort of like conquered planet, and that's where you get these guys. And basically, this just represents like a new world order type thing. It's very spooky, very sad, but also I felt like it's probably one of my better work that I've ever done, even though it's only 40 seconds long. So, anyways. Cool. All right. I'm going to let Matthias come over here. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
All right, everyone. Let's give Luis some big round of applause. We do have time for a couple questions, so if you have them, let us know. Some people on the chat were asking about facial animation, and one of the things is Maxon does have Moves by Maxon, which will allow you to get in all that animation, and the link's in the chat, so you can check that out. And we do have some tutorials on that on Cineversity as well, so check that out. Any other questions from our live audience? No. Too scary, right? I get it. You're scared. It's fine. It's fine. Good, great job. Let's give him another round of applause. Stay tuned. We're going to be taking a break, and we'll be back with Anna Carolina.